Gran Turismo, a series that very much got me into cars, because the main aspect of these games is to collect old, new and all manner of different cars, whether it be a supercar or a car that your dad used to own when you were a kid that was iconic in your eyes but not many other people's. Either way, it was a brilliant game. These two games alone were enough to get me revved up. And as technology grew, we got a look at what a real racing simulator could be with the PS2. The PS3 did better, and then the PS4 got Gran Turismo Sport.
So guys, like I said in that intro, some cars may be iconic to you but not to others, and that is one pivotal thing about these games which I really like. Now I'm going to go through all these games simply for the fact that the first ones, more specifically the first one, didn't exactly get me into gaming as such. It was the second one that kind of piqued my interest for reasons that are just completely out of my control, because there was a certain car in that collection that I got that first time and just thought, wow. So first of all, the first game that I actually played in the series, like most people, Gran Turismo 1, and it actually made me think that simulations were possible. Now before this, all I played was Ridge Racer, and that was a friend's house. It was a good game, but the thing was, it wasn't too true to life. It was more of a fun blast every so often, and to be fair, I got my ass kicked on many occasions by friends on that game, and I was a bit sour most of the time because of that. But this proved a different story, because I was actually good at these games. There you go. But the first one pulled me in like no other, just for that realism. I don't know, there was nothing like it at the time. It just completely blew everyone out of the water. And what made it great is the fact that the car collections in these games, they are literally just loads of cars to collect. I believe something like 290 in all. But the look of them, the feel of them, they all felt different. So a sports car would be different to what you'd expect a hatchback to be. You know what I mean? It was one of those games which proved to be very different depending on the route you took with your cars, which is always a great thing for these games, because a lot of arcade races felt all the same. And don't get me wrong, it was all good for a good fun, but some people wanted something a bit more real, a bit more true to life, and that's what this game provided. But until number 2 came out, I was a little bit off-handed with it, because I didn't really get too much into that game as a whole until I found Gran Turismo 2. Now, when this came out, I wasn't first to jump on the bandwagon. It was actually a friend of mine. He literally clocked it. God knows how he did it, I don't know. He just ravaged it, and he had pretty much everything. But there was one car in particular which I loved in this game, which controlled like a goddamn dream, and that was the RX-7. I don't know why, I just took a liking to that car. It was just, it felt great to drive in this game. But yet ever since the other games have kind of like come out, obviously that has got better in its own right. But this one took a little bit of a different turn, because this one came with 2 discs, which was a little weird, because the first one only came with 1. Now, the main reason this came with 2 discs is because 1 is a GT game, so the main career and main filler of the game, and then also an arcade disc, which meant it had its own separate arcade system. And that was actually pretty cool. It did control a little bit worse, because after playing these games, I didn't so much like the arcade games. The next time I got into arcade gaming was, or arcade style gaming, was Burnout, which we all know where that story ends. It's a great game, wonderful physics and crash physics and all that kind of stuff. But these games were meant to be on a more serious note, and that is where my story with these games starts. And the best one, in my opinion, was the RX-7 to start off these games with. But it didn't end there. In fact, these games only got better, which some people would disagree on, but I will give my reasons why. So guys, in 2001 was when PS2 got its first Gran Turismo game. Now Gran Turismo 3, which came out, was a push, let me tell you. It was a game that literally pushed everything that we knew about the PS1 games to something that looked and sounded amazing in my view. Now this is where it kind of reached its peak a little bit, and I'll explain my reasons for that in a minute, but it did what the other games couldn't, and that's give you more control over racing, and also it give you a B-spec mode which kind of let you judge the entertainment opposed to actually playing the car as well. But the thing is, it kind of took a lot from the original games. It added more cars, but some of the tracks, in my opinion, were a little bit off. Didn't quite reach that power of what other tracks were. Like one of my favourite tracks was Deep Forest, and I loved that track. But some of the new ones in this one didn't quite reach it. In fact, some of them were a lot more complicated. Not for the right reasons. Just bear that in mind, not for the right reasons. Some were just needlessly terrible, and like I say, I might be the only one that thinks that, but that's just my opinion. Don't take it to heart. The thing is, it was still a brilliant game. Now, for me, this is not where it reached its complete peak. There is a game in this process which pushed this to a completely different level. And the game in question will be coming up, but after Gran Turismo 3, it got weird. It got very weird, because we got what essentially is a concept game with so many concept games in it that concept cars in this game are just weird. Now, there are some strange ones, but there are things like your Ford GT, things like that, which really do look and sound amazing in this game. It used the same engine as Gran Turismo 3, and it came out in 2002, so the year afterwards. And it was a pretty good game. It was more of a taster of what was to come with newer cars and newer technology, but it did what it needed to do. I didn't quite get into it though. It was kind of one of those games which I kind of missed out completely. But the next installment that came took a while. In fact, it took quite a while. So in the process, we got what essentially was a massive demo of what was to become Gran Turismo 4. Now this one, to me, is quite a cool one, because it came with what essentially was a DVD of the making of Gran Turismo 4. I'm not sure if all copies came with it. I'm not sure if this was done with all these, but it was done on this one. Now Gran Turismo 4 Prologue was essentially, like I said, a demo for what was to come. Gran Turismo 4 was a massive game, and this kind of like, any progress you made in this transferred over to Gran Turismo 4, and it was an amazing experience. It was more like license tests than anything else. It kind of like teetered that little bit of going round corners, teaching you how to take tight corners and take them in the right line, things like that. And it was a brilliant way to kind of show off what the new engine could do, because it was a new engine that powered this game, and that in itself was just amazing to see. So we got that one, and then obviously the making of, which was brilliant. And then came the peak of Gran Turismo's success, in my opinion, for the PS2, and that was Gran Turismo 4. Now this really did just push everything I knew. With 700 cars, 50 tracks, it made everything from the previous games all come into one. It's physics, it's cars, it's tracks. Obviously, some of the tracks in this kind of got tweaked a little bit, if you will. And some tracks were missing completely, which kind of like baffled the mind a bit. I'm not sure why that happened, but it did. But the game itself, it's all the more better for it, in my opinion. The cars in this range from everything. There were some like duplicate cars which people have kind of pointed out, with certain cars being labelled as a different car, just only in a different colour. I don't know why Polyphony did that, but they did. There's nothing I can do about that. But the thing is, this game pushed what I think Gran Turismo should have became. And it was one of those games which completely changed my outlook on cars. But then something strange happened with the Gran Turismo series. With the PS3, it kind of dwindled a little bit. And dare I say it, Forza ended up being my go-to racer, which is really sad to say, but there were reasons for it. So let's look into it. So like I said, it was 2005 when we got Gran Turismo 4. And the sad thing is the fact that we had to wait a long time to get a full Gran Turismo game again. But in the meantime, while that happened, they did something similar to what they did with Gran Turismo 4 when they released a prologue for that game, which was Gran Turismo 5 Prologue. Now this was released 2 years after, so 2008, for the PlayStation 3, and because this came out, everybody thought I might get it sooner, and it didn't work out that way. In fact, we'd have to wait another 2 years before we got a full Gran Turismo game. Now this was essentially what Gran Turismo 4 Prologue was, only you weren't doing just random license tests, you actually had proper races for this. And again, any data that you saved for this transferred over to Gran Turismo 5, which was brilliant. It gave you a taster of what was to come. However, what was to come didn't really make up for what we got. It didn't. Now, I'm going to put that one down because there are too much to go into right now. But Gran Turismo 5 came along 2 years later, so 2010 from 2008 when Prologue got released. Now this is a good game. It is a good game, but it has shortcomings, a lot of shortcomings. Considering what racers were doing at the time, so things like physical damage, cockpit views, and things like that, it was literally lacking on all these fronts. And I once heard somebody say that crashing into a wall in this game sounded like throwing a refrigerator down a stairwell, because it didn't sound like you'd hit a wall. That was it. There was no realism behind it. Now later on they did rectify this with physical damage, but not to the car, just cosmetic, which I don't understand, because Forza had been doing that kind of thing since its first game on the original Xbox, so there's no reason why they couldn't have done it. It just looks like a development thing which they didn't want to do, that they'd taken from the original games. But the thing was with this game, it was lacking in a few other spaces as well. Some of the tracks kind of looked copied and pasted from the PS2 game, which didn't bode well really, considering the graphical power of the PS3 at the time. It didn't reach that high, I'll admit that. But the thing was, it was still one of the best racing simulators at the time due to its physics, essentially. That's basically what pushed it through. Its physics were top notch. But if you're talking about immersion, it didn't do so well. Simply for the fact that all the things I've listed, and also the blackout of the cockpit views in standard cars. I don't understand how that happened, because again, Forza literally had that from Forza 3, and that came out around about the same time as this, so there's really no real excuse for that. It just looks like a development or a rushed development, or something they didn't think of, or something that was added later on in its life. It's still a good game, but it just didn't live up to that point. So what could possibly be better than this? Well, it did get better. It took some time, but it did get better. Now, I'm going to be honest with this. It took me a while to get back into the GT series after this, simply because the game itself is a ton of fun. Gran Turismo 6 is a ton of fun, and it added more than you could ever want. There was twice as many cars as there was in Gran Turismo 4. It did take a few cars away from what Gran Turismo 5 had, but it took away what was needed to be taken away and give you all the cars that you needed without kind of duplicating those cars just because you had a different colour. The thing is with this game, it improved on a lot of things, but the one thing that it still kept, which really annoyed me, was the blackout views for the cockpits in what were now known as normal cars. It just took the standard word away from those normal cars. I don't understand. I don't know why they did that, but again, Forza have been doing this for years with cockpit views in their cars, and there's no reason for it except for the fact of development, and they had more than enough time. This came out in 2013, so 3 years after Gran Turismo 5, and it was the last hurrah for the PS3 concerning Gran Turismo. So I don't understand how that happened. Where cars, tracks and physics are concerned, it's the same thing with Gran Turismo 5. The physics are top notch. There's no real compromise where that's concerned, so they kind of like put things right where that was concerned. They also give you cosmetic damage in this, which again, I'll take cosmetic damage, but it could have done with something a little bit more realistic, in all fairness. So given this situation, I would love to see this remastered in some way. I very doubt it'll happen, but I'd love to see it happen. But the thing is, even with this game, even with Polyphony knowing what people wanted from these games, there was still one thing that didn't make that much sense. And that's what they did next, because I'm not sure I understand it. So, the last game on this list was always going to be for the PS4. The thing is, this is one that I absolutely love because of its look and its feel. However, what I don't understand is why they took the approach they took, which was mainly for the online crowd. Now, all through these years, Gran Turismo has been known for its single-player approach to these games, like race days and things like that, and it was always made to be that game. It was meant to be a collectathon, essentially. But the thing is, this game didn't take that approach. Now, Gran Turismo Sport is hit and miss with me, because they didn't add career support until after the release of the game. It was mostly online, and they did it via an update, which was fine. They added all the cups that you could possibly want, which was fine. I didn't mind that. But the thing is, that initial release, I didn't pick this up. In fact, I left it for quite a few years before I got it. I only got it last year and gave it a bash then. And considering what they'd done previous as a simulation, it was okay, but the online side of it still wasn't perfect. With Gran Turismo 5 and Gran Turismo 6, the servers would regularly match you with people that you didn't want to race or that were overpowered in their cars compared to you, so you had no chance in winning anyway. But this one made that a lot easier. It did streamline that a little bit, so that you weren't put in rooms where you were going to get your ass kicked, essentially. But until they added that single player component, I literally gave it a miss, just because I couldn't justify picking it up. I saw it many times through those years and I just thought, I can't pick it up. So when I actually did, I was intrigued to find out that they'd actually put the single player campaign in there again, with what was things like Sunday Cups and all that kind of stuff. Some of the race days were a bit lacking concerning certain races, and dare I say it was a little bit more easy than Gran Turismo 5 and 6. That's not saying much, but it did kind of throw physics out the window a little bit, because the physics in this have substantially changed compared to 5 and 6. 5 and 6 are nothing compared to this. This feels like any car could spin you off track, so I very doubt I'd want any kind of supercar for this game, for the simple fact that I'd probably crash and die if it were real, to be fair. But the thing is, the game itself has this feel about it that Polyphony didn't really care as much unless it was for the online component. And I understand that they had the GT Championship events going on, they still do, but the thing is, it didn't set well with me. I'm hoping with the PlayStation 5 and the fact that we know that Gran Turismo 7 is actually coming, yes, a numbered entry, so I'm guessing this one isn't part of the main series, which is weird. But then again, this is Polyphony, who have released, what, 2 prologue games, a concept game, a robot game for PS1, amongst other things. But the thing is, I'm hoping that it's a return to form. I'm kind of hoping that it's a return to form in that respect, because if it is, then that will be my perfect game, as long as they put the effort into that single player campaign, where you can get lost as being a racer, of a simulation, which is brilliant. So I'm hoping that that goes back, or that Polyphony go back to their good old days. We shall see if that happens, but as it stands, this isn't my favourite, and it peaked at Gran Turismo 4 in my opinion. 5 and 6 were alright, but they kind of put a little bit less emphasis on the game, so hopefully that will change with Gran Turismo 7. What is my outcome of this video and the Gran Turismo series in general? I'll be honest, it's still one of my favourite series. However, in its later inceptions, Forza comes very close to beating this out, and that makes me a little bit sad, knowing that part of my love for these games is nostalgia, but looking at it, or each game, as an object and objective, I really can't help wondering where it's going to go next and if it's going to do the right thing. So hopefully we'll get the right thing. If we don't, I'll be very, very sad in the process, but that's been my video of this series. I've kind of loved covering it. It's taken me a while to film as well, so, and edit and do other stuff, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully Gran Turismo 7 will live up to what we all want. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe as usual. And in the meantime, guys,